Good afternoon and welcome to another Finax podcast. My name is Tamara and this is my colleague Šimon. Šimon, hi.
Hi everyone, glad to be here.
Today we are going to talk about a very, I would say, important topic. I think it's one of the things that people often don't like to do, and that is to start to, creating their own budget. So I was thinking today we could discuss a little bit what are the main points one needs to think about when starting to budget, and maybe we could give them a few tips. What do you say?
That sounds perfect. I think it's definitely, as you say, one of the things in personal finance that people don't like to do, and not even as much creating budgets because you can gather motivation for that, but maintaining a budget later is one of those annoying obligations that people often fail to adhere to. But I think it's really crucial if you want to invest for the long run, like we discussed in our other podcasts, if you want to stick to this habit for decades, which is the optimal way to do it for people like us. I think having a budget where you free up the money for investing, free up the money for meeting your financial goals is absolutely crucial. And hence budget is the primary tool that helps you build healthy financial habits and sort of have a plan. So that's probably the first step you should start with when you're trying to get your personal finances in order. So I think no one should underestimate this step. So definitely good to talk about it.
Yes, I think what you said, exactly this. It's really important and crucial in starting your healthy finances. Yeah. This is the only way where you can see, how much you have on the one side and how much you can basically spend on the other side. So it's all about income and obviously costs and all the outcomes. Let's put it this way, for everything that goes out. And it is good basically to track your budget or to track your income and your costs over a few months in order to get a better idea of all the little things that you might not think about. It is also really important to think that there are often things that we pay maybe only once a year. For example, some kind of insurances or, car maintenance or new tires or
taxes,
stuff like that.
just left my account this month.
It's really important to kind of include that in your budget as well over the year, because it is something you need obviously to think about when putting money on side, so you can be ready whenever you need one of those things.
Yeah.
So in creating a budget, nowadays there are many different tools, right? People can really do it old way with maybe pen and paper or Excel table, or nowadays with all the apps that are available basically through the banks or any other financial I would say nowadays fintechs and different providers who can basically help a lot without any additional time waste in order to have a pretty good overview of where the money went. So what do you use? Probably Finbot, right?
To be fair, I like to be even old-fashioned, but you always learn over time. But maybe I would like to make a minor point here before we move to the different points. And I think the crucial thing about what you just said is that the first step, really, if I'm a person that never had an overview of their financial flows, let's call it in a fancy way, right? Simply said, of where their money goes each month. The first crucial step is to learn how and learn and examine our spending patterns, right? Learn where our money tends to go each month, because that was often the case for me before I joined Finax, before I started learning more and reading books about personal finance. It always looked that I I had a plan. I sort of thought that this is a lot of money that I'm getting at the beginning of the month, and it always somehow evaporated. And I had no idea how that was possible because I didn't have the feeling that I was overspending or spending on some major expensive items. So
one can get really surprised at the end of the month to see.
Oh yeah, totally.
How much
And then it's the week before the paycheck that is a week of suffering and hoping that the first day of the next month won't be a national holiday, so that your paycheck can arrive as scheduled. So I would say that the first step that is good to remember and where it's good to start if you're in a situation like this is to take some time, sit down over the weekend, sit down with your partner, sit down alone, whoever you want to create the budget with, and look at your expense structure over the past couple of months. And as Tamara said, there are many tools for that. I used to use Excel when I was starting out. I just loved the extra amount of control it gave me over the apps. So the way I would do it would simply be, when I was first learning about my expenses and when I was first trying to create a budget, I was sitting here in Amsterdam in my first year, and I sort of had an Excel sheet where I had a couple of categories, right? So I had food, I had housing, I had insurance, I had transport, I had fun. That's as a student back then, that was a very important item each year. And I would open my banking app where or my two banking apps, one for the Slovak account, one for Revolut, where I would have the old transactions from the past couple of months. And for each of the past couple of months, I would write down each transaction in each category, and then via the sum function simply summed it up and sort of checked over the past 3, 4, 5 months how much I spent in transport, on fun. Housing was relatively predictable, right? Food was varying, and sort of see how much money was going where. And when I then reassessed it, or what I later learned when I started to try cutting expenses, was that, for example, on fun or on food, I was spending needlessly much, and there was a lot of space to improve. But sort of the first step was to learn that. But the more I do for work, or the longer I do this, the more tedious it gets and the more inconvenient it gets, because you have to. I had my calendar reminders, but you sort of want to procrastinate that away. So with this, you have to sit down every week or every month and reassess the last month of spending, and that can be annoying. So I think there are now tools that maybe give you less control, but are much more convenient and hence easier to use, maybe for people who aren't good with Excel, don't like sending up spreadsheets, would sort of,
it's less maybe time consuming, So
exactly. Yeah. So that was actually a question that I wanted to ask you back. And the question is, are there any more convenient tools to learn about your past expenses? Are you using any of those? Well, what do you do to learn?
To be honest, I'm a little bit of an older generation than you. So, but I wanted to say that generally, when I speak to people, it is one of the most painful things for them, to do their budgeting and to start doing their budgeting. But I can say that, if one does it over first 2-3 months at least, at the end of the month, just to see how things go and what's happening, just to review overall how their finances, or his or her finances, depending if we're talking about an individual or a family, maybe basically work. It is an essential tool. Budget is an essential tool to better personal finance, because it enables you to see really how much money is going in, how much money is going out, and why and where. And by reviewing this, you can actually see, as you mentioned, there are 3 big categories when it comes to costs, and this is transportation, living, obviously, and food. And if we can do something to cut down on those 3 categories, we are going probably to be able to save some money as well as on the others. But when we talk about generally doing budgeting, I think it's good to think about maybe looking at the weeks at the beginning, especially for somebody who is younger like you, and for the students, because there is like this weekly budget, but I would basically divide it into the work days budget and then the weekend budgets, because over
For
the weekend,
students, an important distinction.
Yes, we students, I mean, young people tend to have different lifestyle over the weekend. I mean, even later, depending what are the activities and how people live their lives. But generally, for example, maybe during the week you are always in the office and you need to take lunch or whatever in the office. But then during the weekend you can actually cook at home, or on the other hand, you want to go out and you spend some money because you're going out with friends and stuff like that. So it is maybe good to think about that sometimes if you plan a weekly budget, it might happen that by the weekend you don't have money and it's going to be a lonely weekend at home. But I'm kidding. But it's a good thing to think about it, because it kind of has a little bit of a different dynamics, even the budget during the work week and over the weekends. Obviously, there is always space to think about, what kind of subscriptions we have. Do we need as many? Do we need I don't know, top model from our mobile, or we can go with something. So once we have that somewhere written down, as I always say, mathematics very exact. So there is no way to hide. So basically, it helps us come to terms to see if we are living life under our limitations or above, and it is kind of a good sign how we're gonna do over a longer term. So the sooner we do it and the sooner we come to terms of how we spend and what we do with our money, the sooner we'll be able to do something and make our finances more healthy. But when you ask me what I use, I think it's a mixture of everything. I want to tell people, especially nowadays when everything is in your mobile phone, that especially if you live, for example, in Sweden, you really don't need anything else but your app, because there is no cash. They don't use cash. So basically, if you take an app and you connect it to your bank account, you have your entire spendings in one click, and you can tell with a very big precision where you spend your money during the month. And it basically doesn't require any effort from you in that way, that you need to really sit down and spend time on that. So it can be attractive also for people to do it like that. And then, sit down and think about the ways that you can improve your expenditures, meaning basically what are the ways that you can basically save some money and then invest it and do something with it that is going to have more of a value over the long term.
Exactly. So I also love spending overviews, and there are several types, right? So some of them you have directly in your bank. So the reason why in the beginning of the podcast I said that these spending overviews might get you a little less control compared to your own Excel is that sometimes, and it also depends on the specific app, on the specific spending overview, but sometimes you cannot choose your expense categories or divide them into subcategories according to your wishes. But roughly, given the time that you have to invest, which is 0, it's amazing. So for example, for grocery shopping or for going out, I don't use Excel much anymore. I don't use it anymore almost at all. I think we will be talking about maintaining budget and stuff like that later. But for categories like groceries or such as going out, pops and similar items, I just look into my banking app and I see the exact amount that I've spent in this month, and I know how far that is away from my budget limit. So really using bank spending overviews is amazing. One thing that can be slightly inconvenient is if you use more bank accounts. I think that is relatively common today, that you have one bank account, which is sort of the main account from which you pay your recurring bills and to which you receive your paycheck. Then you maybe have a Revolut account for either spending abroad or more casual spending, or you might even have more bank accounts. In our office, it's relatively common for people to have even more than 3. And especially for me, as saying that as a student or as a foreign student, international student, those people also like to have at least 3 bank accounts. So then it can get a little messy because you have 3 different spending overviews. You might fund different expenses with different accounts. So then it's good to have one so-called personal finance management app, which are available online, where you can link all your bank accounts and they will create a common spending overview for you, which can help you merge your spending overviews from your different accounts into one. Or if you only use one bank account, then just check out the pie chart that it creates for you, see what you're spending on, and there you can see whether that actually reflects your priorities, right? As Tamara said, already looking at that will sort of give you a hint that for some expense categories, you're not actually spending as much as you would like to, because it's not your life priority. It might not be important for your happiness, yet you spend tens or even hundreds of euros per it. So those are the categories you should primarily focus on and try to cut them down, alongside the big 3 of housing, transport, and food that Tamara already mentioned.
Yes, whenever we speak about basically costs and cutting costs, we always have to say that there is a limit to it, right? So
exactly.
As you mentioned, happiness is also a very important part of our life. So there should be things that kind of I would say will stay always in our budget because they are the things that make us happy. But exactly, reviewing everything, we'll be able to see maybe some of the categories where we are spending more than we need to. And then there will be maybe categories where we want to spend even more than we did before, right? It would be good that these categories where we want to spend are something like savings and investments for the future. But what I'm trying to say is that while we talk about possibility of cutting costs, we do have to say that there is a limit to it, right? You cannot cut costs to 0, even if you want to. It's impossible. But on the other side, there is the other part of the budgeting, and that's our income part. That's where we can always work to kind of make it greater, right? To make it bigger. So our income can be bigger in terms that we can do some side jobs. Nowadays, there is many possibilities to work over internet or even social media. There is possibility, obviously, of passive income and stuff like that. So while maybe we cannot do as much on the cost side, we can always try to do something on the other side, the side of our income.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a hint or tip or advice that is often overlooked when we talk about budgeting, and that is that your income also isn't set in stone, as they say. So I think that is actually the primary thing that everyone should attempt. And it's just not, for me, it's not just about side hustles or online jobs, which are also great. But the problem with them is that many times they are temporary, right? We want to also have free time. So if you're working towards some goal where you need to bring in extra money to get it fulfilled, such as paying off your toxic debt that is taking away too much money from you, or building up an emergency fund that is supposed to protect you, then absolutely, I think taking on an extra job or we're looking for side hustles is absolutely okay, because that is about getting you safe. That is about getting you from a danger zone. In the long run, I think many people, for example, and especially in some European countries, are sort of afraid to ask for a raise, negotiate for their income. I think that is something that should be much more normalized. So
That's a whole different topic, yes, but you're right.
Yeah.
It's a big,
so actually chase your manager and ask them, ask for feedback regularly, but then also once a year, try to sit down with them and ask for a raise. Tell them about the projects you worked on, tell them about the value you brought, tell them about the inflation that happened over the year. Find the good reasons why you deserve a raise and just ask for it, because many people sort of passively expect that the managers will think about it themselves, but they have their KPIs in mind. They they won't do it unless you explicitly ask.
But managers want to maintain the costs as well in their budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you motivate them, or basically,
or just ask.
It's a great point. Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to appreciate yourself in order for the others to appreciate you. So exactly, do not be afraid to ask. There is usually, as you said, it's not going just to be offered to you by itself. So that's one thing that one needs to do, even though it might require some kind of
guts,
I would say. But going out of your comfort zone very often, it is not an easy talk, but it's the one that can make a difference, and nobody should be afraid to do it, because at the end of the day, it's one of the ways to raise your income. And if you look at the long term, like you said, there is inflation, there is so many things that are going on, and basically, if you don't take care of your own money, nobody will. That's the whole point of this discussion, whether we talk about budgeting or anything else. It's in your hands, so you need to do something about it. And one other thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to costs, there's a great saying, and it's afford everything, but not anything. So as we said, while you don't want to take away things that mean a lot to you, whether it's a small coffee outside or going to cinema once a week or whatever makes you happy, then that this category is really important for you. And while you are still going to maintain a budget or a greater budget for that category, you might in a way decrease some of the other categories, which in long run will help you. You mentioned a very important thing as well in one of your sentences a while ago, and it was dealing with your debts. I think it's also really important thing.
Can I just add an example to the previous thing before we get to the debts? Sure. Because I sort of had a good example for our audience to be able to better imagine this. I think that is a crucial idea, sort of. This one of my favorite financial authors, Vrhovec, Sethi, says it in this way, that I'm not here to guilt trip you about your lattes. Buy as many lattes as you want, but make sure that your budget and your actual spending reflects your life priorities, reflects what makes you happy. Because we, as people who are trying to talk about personal finance and help you with it, I don't think our job should be to guilt trip you for every expense. Personal finance or being financially healthy doesn't mean not spending any money at all, because money is here to buy happiness, right? The problem is that oftentimes our spending doesn't truly reflect our priorities. So for me, it was, for example, when I reviewed the expenses, and I saw that I learned by experimenting that I could save a lot of money by cooking my own food. I wasn't doing it as much in the past, and I also wasn't doing much meal prepping, but I sort of developed this habit where I almost always cook. So I would always cook a large pot of, a large pot of some dish, whichever. You can also search online, you search YouTube for budget recipes and stuff like that. The internet is full of amazing advice, I think. So don't be afraid to try that. And it's always lasts for 4 or 5 portions. So I just put it in the fridge, put it in the lunchbox, put it in the fridge for 4 or 5 days, and just take it with me, whether I go to work. In our office, it's actually quite common for people to warm up their meal prep. So, you can see that this works, right? And already, if that saves you a couple of trips to a restaurant or your office canteen a week, that can accumulate to a lot of money over that can be 100, 200 euros over a month. So, for example, and there was the second example about fun and going out, right? So, that's also used to take away a lot of money from me. And so I just adjusted my habits a bit. I learned, to say more a little bit more. And I think that is also an important idea that I wanted to explicitly mention in this podcast, is that setting your priorities will sometimes mean that you will have to learn to say no to people, to friends, to your close ones. And I think that is okay, because I think that oftentimes in our culture, we sort of feel obliged to spend money in order to make other people value us. And I don't think that is a healthy thing to do. I think it should be more normalized to say, no, sorry, I'm out of my fun budget, so I will not go out this week. I might go in 2 weeks, right? And so just saying this no a couple of Fridays, let's say 2 Fridays out of the month, saying that, no, I want to save a little bit, so today I will stay at home. If you want, you can come and we can watch Disney Plus or watch Netflix, and just drink some wine, eat something alongside that, spending much less money compared to going to a club. That can also save you, accumulate to another 100 over a month, especially if you're a student, right? Like me. For adults, maybe Tamara will have better examples that see their life better. But these small adjustments, saying a no 2 times a month and creating a habit such as cooking your own meals, can accumulate to 200, 250 euros. And that is not a negligible amount. That for many people can mean that suddenly they're making a surplus. Suddenly they are finally capable of setting aside some income and build up an emergency fund. So I think doing these experiments is super important. Sorry,
I think regardless of the age group that we are talking about, it's about having goals and having a character actually to kind of follow the plan in order to reach those goals. So goals are also really important in this way. We know that people, once they set up their goals, they are more inclined to actually stay on the path of reaching those goals. Mm-hmm. So when we are talking about budgeting, that's the same thing. If we know that we have, mortgage, or we want to save for our children's education or stuff like that, and if we put it as a goal, and we need to basically make sure that we are aware that we need to work monthly in order to achieve this goal in the long term. It's the same like having, your pension savings or investment somewhere on the side. It's a very, very long-term plan. But if you stick to it, you know that you'll be fine once you need to retire. So that's what I'm saying. Budget is just the first step of basically having a reality check and reviewing your finances and looking at the ways you can make them healthier and you can make them more sustainable. And important stuff that we've discussed here is that if you make yourself miserable and you take away everything that you like, it's not going to be sustainable over the long run. So that's why when we talk about minimalism or different styles people can live, we need to look at ourselves, and we really need to be very true to ourselves, because otherwise we are not going to reach the goal that we set. So it's really important to know yourself, and through these numbers you can also get to know yourself better. But as you said, when we create a budget and when we looking at it for 2 or 3 months, we need to reassess it again in a few months just to see if whatever adjustments we have made are working for us and what we can do. Obviously, situations in life are changing very often, right? So either we can get a raise or I mean, on the other hand, something unfortunate can happen, that one loses a job or gets sick, or depending if we are talking about the family budget, there is more people that are involved. There is more ways that things can go wrong or right in a way. So this is why it's important to know that, if we do the budgeting now, it might be completely different in a year, or in 2 years, or of course in 5 years, because your income is not going to be the same now as it's going to be in 5 years. So there is lots to work with, but I think the main goal with this finance reviewing and creating a budget is actually to get to know yourself and your habits better, and to set up some healthy habits for the future.
Yeah, sort of cut expenses on categories which don't really bring you as much happiness, right? So substituting for cooking, or exchanging some nights in a club for watching Netflix, and, being at least taking a rest and not having a hangover over the entire weekend. That doesn't reduce your happiness. That can, but not necessarily, right? It might for some people. Then they can find spending else they can find some surplus elsewhere. But the main point for me was that creating these habits didn't take away my happiness. It was cutting on expenses that didn't matter as much for me, so that I could keep other things. So if there are these little treat yourself categories that bring you a lot of happiness, if you love your coffee dates and want to go on them, then be sure to keep them, because you need to be happy in order to stick to these habits in the long term. But try to look elsewhere where the substitution won't take away as much from you. And it will require maybe some honesty with people around you. It might require saying no. But if you know, crucially, that you need to save, because as we said, actually building up savings, building up an emergency fund, saving for retirement, that is also something that will bring you a lot of happiness over your life. It's sort of, when something happens and you don't have an emergency fund to cover it, or if your income massively drops in retirement and there's nothing else you can do at that point once you reach it, that can take away a lot of happiness, aggregate like total happiness from your life.
Yes.
So although you cannot imagine it in advance, once it comes, you would have regretted that, right? So
yes.
also,
and it's too late. So
and it's too late. So when we're saying that you should have these categories in your budget, we're not doing that because we want to, people not to enjoy their lives. It's because if you don't think about these things, you will not enjoy your life as much, because this utility, this happiness that will come from those events of not having money and having financial stress will be massive. So just think about it. And I think that is a good time to mention also these healthy budget ratios. So when you're reassessing your budget and setting up targets, because ultimately what you want to get to, what is the ultimate result of budgeting, is having some target amounts for each category that you want to spend monthly or weekly, and then sort of tracking whether you are actually meeting it. So set up, 300 for food, set up 200 for transport, set up whatever you pay for housing, set up 150 for fun or whatever. Having these target amounts, right? Target amounts for kids.
Do you want to mention 50, 30, 20?
Sorry?
Do you want to mention 50, 30, 20?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying, this is again an intuitive rule, so it works for different people differently. But what is a crucial thing is when you start, so when you're starting out with building healthy financial habits, create a budget that will have 10 to 20% of your income, of your net income, so the thing that arrives in your bank account each month, for saving and investing. Those can be financial goals, so they will differ according to which stage of your financial life you are at. So those might go for debt repayments, those might go for emergency fund savings, those might go for retirement later on after you fulfill these first two steps. But try to save that amount and devote that to financial goals, 10 to 20%, ideally more closely to 20, but it also depends on your expense structure and on your income. Not everyone can afford anything. There's nothing that works universally for everyone. It's individual, but try to have this ratio for financial goals. And then the rest usually gets split in a way that 50 to 60% goes towards necessary expenses. So those are those that we have to pay every month unless we want to die or freeze or starve. So that will be your housing, that will be your internet and telephone bills, that will be your utilities, that will be food and groceries, transport, maybe some basic one, and so on. And then the rest, so around 30% usually, maybe slightly less, maybe slightly more, will be for nice to have expenses usually. So those are the ones that we have to be happy, but that we can go without. So that's better clothing, that's restaurant meals, that's fun and going out to pubs, right? Those are categories such as this. That's our Netflix subscription. So you should roughly aim for these ratios, but the main thing I want to emphasize is always have those savings and investing category for your financial goals, and devote 10 to 20% of income to that. Those are crucial for your overall life satisfaction and happiness when you take it, from the long-term perspective, and you should think about them.
I just want to stress a little bit on financial reserve, as you mentioned it as well. It is obviously the first financial goal that you should set up if you haven't had before. It is always good to have it, no matter how old or young you are, and it's necessary to have it because in case one doesn't have it, it can create a real crisis potentially when something happens. So this is, if you haven't put anything else on the side, it's a good time to start putting on the side potentially your total expenses for 3 to 6 months, so you can sleep well and you don't have to worry in case something major breaks down or I don't know, you lose your job or something like that. So this is definitely your first goal you should set up when it comes to your financial goals. Also, I think it is important to mention here the tips and tricks that we always talk about. One of them obviously being paying yourself first. So once you have your income arriving to your account, making sure that whatever you need to pay for these financial goals and stuff that is important for your future is already in a way automatized, so you don't have to worry about that. And on the other hand, you don't have an opportunity to spend it during the month, saying yourself, oh, I'm going to wire it later on in the month, and then you might actually realize that you have spent it. So try to do that. Pay yourself first. That's a very important thing. And as I mentioned, automatization is a great help nowadays. So whatever you need to settle in terms of, mortgage payments, stuff like that, investing for yourself and everything, just make sure that it automatically goes away from your account.
So that you don't even count on that money.
Exactly. You don't count on it because it's gone. So you really have whatever is left. And in that way, you also prevent yourself from overspending in a way. So
I would like to mention one thing that one of our colleagues says that I love here is that if you ask most people, are you able to save 10 to 15% of your income? Many will say, no, we tried many times, because actually people try many times and it often fails. But then if you flip the perspective and ask them, if something happened this month or for the upcoming 6 months, and your income, you only received 85% of your paycheck or 90% of your paycheck, would you be able to survive with your family? And most people will be, we will have to make some adjustments. It won't be the most convenient thing I can imagine, but we would survive. Why wouldn't we survive? Because if you don't count on that money, then people always somehow adapt. We're we're an adaptable species.
Yeah, but people like to, they don't feel like to feel uncomfortable, or they don't like to, in a way, restrict themselves.
Yeah.
But once they have to, then they do. But
so that's why
exactly.
I cannot stress this automation more. Whenever I usually receive my paycheck on the 1st, and so on the 4th of each month there are 3 standing orders that automatically send money away from my newly earned salary, and that is my health insurance, and the second 2 are my savings and my investment account. So once you do this, you don't even have to try, and you don't have to even do anything else, and you just won't count on the money. On the 5th in the morning, you look in your bank account and you sort of, that money is gone, and you have to somehow survive the month with what is left. And for most people, that will already be enough to not to control themselves, not to spend that extra 100 euros on some other silly purchase that they would have made because they would underestimate it if it didn't go away. So paying yourself first and doing that automatically via standing orders is super important. And
then we are again back at prioritization, right? So if you prioritize and you know what is really important for you, then you can make it, I'm sure. And it might take a couple of months to get used to, as we said, but I think it is essential for your long-term financial health. To do the budgeting, to think about how to spend your money, to optimize this budget, and to see, these habits that can lead you in a way on a good path, and that can basically cause some trouble in your budgeting. So I hope we have motivated you with this chat today, to start to look at your finances with a little bit closer look. And I would just like to say that I don't think budgeting is, at the end of the day, such a big deal. You might actually like it once you realize how beneficial it can be. And it's essential, as I said, no matter what age group you belong to. Yes, that's... the amount of financial stress and feeling of low comfort that it will, take away is always worth it. So if we wanted to motivate you to do one thing, then this upcoming weekend, sit down over the weekend, look at the expenses over the past 3 months, try to look at online tips where you can save, and try to identify at least 3 expense categories where you think you are spending more than is optimal for your happiness, and where you can switch to lower cost alternatives by just saying no a couple of times, or by just doing one habit. Sorry, I just want to add here that it is really important to tell people that these kind of adjustments, they don't have to be some major adjustments. Exactly. At first, but any optimization will better your finances. So, once even you make a little adjustment, maybe in 2 or 3 months, you are going to realize that you could make even a bigger adjustment. So it's just something that will show you that even, let's say, you save, 10 or 30 euros a month over a year, it can be a substantial amount of money. So you can definitely use it in a better way. Yeah. And as you said, it will improve over time. So even if in the first months you save 30 euros in that categories, that is perfect. And maybe in 3 years of practicing that habit, you will find your ways to push it from 30 to 75. It is okay. For example, that's what I learned with many of my habits, that as years were progressing, I was finding new and new ways to optimize it even a bit more. And maybe in a year time, you will tell us that it's fun. Yeah. You can leave a comment. Enjoying it like Shimon, for example. Yeah. So thank you, Shimon, once again for joining me today. Thanks for having me. It's great. Thank you guys for watching us. Please follow us and subscribe to our content on YouTube channels and other social media. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach, and we'll be happy to answer any of the personal finances or investment questions you might send us.
That's absolutely true. Thanks for joining us today, and have a good day. Bye.
Bye.